I'm going to be talking briefly about the experiences that we had in terms of implementing SYSPRO. But firstly, I just want to run through exactly who we are. I don't think too many people know who Schauenburg is. So we're part of the Schauenburg International Group. This is a German family-owned diversified industrial group. You can see on the right-hand side some of the companies that we have. Currently, we have 32 divisions in 14 countries. But I just want to add that we as Schauenburg are a South African OEM of mining safety equipment. We are self-funded and all our products are locally developed and produced. We don't get anything from Germany. So I'd like to also put there, proudly South African. But if you see our slogan, which says innovation that saves, that's the flag of South Africa, not of Germany. We have approximately 630 employees. In fact, as we sit here now, we're at 650, and half of those are service technicians. We are a level 4 BEE company. We've actually just gone through our ISO audit last week, and we are compliant to the mining charter. So that's just a rough idea of who we are. Then the question has to be asked, why did we choose SYSPRO? For many years, we had used Sage 300, but Sage 300 was really, we were given a choice, either go to X3 but we're not supporting Sage 300. We found that Sage was a very good financial accounting package, but not a good MRP. There were a lot of plug-ons with MRP and Auto Simply. It didn't work for us. So I actually engaged in a very comprehensive comparison. I looked at ERPs for medium enterprises, and the three that I compared was X3, Microsoft Dynamics, and SYSPRO. So the reason why I went with SYSPRO, I was very impressed with SYSPRO working with BI tools. And I must say, when they did the demonstration, everybody really knocked the socks off me in terms of what you can do in inventory optimization and a few other areas. Also, it is locally produced and supported, so we weren't worried about support. And the Department of Science and Technology came to us and said, if you buy SYSPRO, we will gladly subsidize you. So that was also a lovely little cherry on top of the cake to help us with our decision. So we also had quite a rigid road to implementation. So the first part was we had to choose the right partner. And we did this more or less on an RFI type basis. We put a value system together. We consulted widely with industry users. I went and spoke to Reutech and a few other places. And I invited 3 parties to come and give us a demo and do a presentation in terms of how they were going to implement their system. We did a calculation according to the value system, and EOH IOCO was chosen as our implementation partner. So we started this whole journey with a very comprehensive business process mapping of all our major functions using Enterprise Architect. And this is our sales function, our stores function, our distribution function, manufacturing, even accounting. So we really had to understand our business from the bottom up, and that helped us a lot in terms of the next steps that we took. We obviously had a few challenges. So the first one was our go live date was delayed by 6 months. Our finance department had some tough deadlines with regards to financial year end and budgeting. So we said, okay, begrudgingly, we said, let's delay by 6 months. We were battling with change management. We found that people who were used to using ECPAC were very resistant to go over to a new system. I don't think you should underestimate how complex SYSPRO is. If you come from a very simple accounting background to an all-encompassing, very complex ERP, people get overwhelmed. So change management was one of those things. Testing was another challenge. Identifying super users, and then time for training. Remember, people are working every day, but they still have to make time for training. On a technical side, where we had a challenge was the workflow and the MRP. We found that the workflow within SYSPRO was not as good as what we had in Sage 300. And then on the MRP, it took us a lot of effort, almost 3 months of effort, before we got the MRP working the way we wanted to work. So those were some of the challenges, and this is how we overcame them. We established a steering committee with all the stakeholders, and that was directors in the company, along with the senior consultants, along with all the super users. And we met at least every 2 weeks. We made sure we had top management buying in, and I shared everything with the shareholders. I had, because we have a group controlling function in Germany, and they were also keen to know where we're going and what we're doing. They wanted us to go the Navision MS Dynamics route because that's what they adopted in Germany. I convinced them that we're going SYSPRO, so they wanted to keep a close eye on what we're doing. So they were involved in this process. We also ensured that we had a very rigorous adherence to change control. No changes were allowed without the full implication being assessed and the cost implication, because you talk to people and they just want to change this, change that, change that. And I said, no, let's find out how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to delay the project. And if they were prepared to take accountability for that, then I said, fine, then we do it. Okay, we had weekly project meetings. We scheduled many training sessions. And I must say this 6 month delay helped us quite a bit because we could do a lot more training. And I said, I'm not going to skimp on training. The more training we do, the better people will feel confident once we go live. Another element, and this is where IOCO came in, the IOCO project team, usually they hand over to the support team, but the original project team stayed on site with us for 2 months post go live. And I must say that was a really fantastic move, and it helped us tremendously. And then, as all things, we had to make sure that our IT systems and infrastructure were stable and met the performance requirements. No disrespect to IOCO, but when it comes to software and ERP versus IT, if something goes wrong, then there's usually finger pointing as to who's responsible. But luckily, we dealt with that very early on, and we overcame that potential problem. Okay, so if I just summarize in terms of our journey, I think with the help of IOCO, we survived. It was a long journey, but certainly they held our hand throughout, and we're very grateful for that. And as I said, delaying the go live was a blessing in disguise. I must once again just reiterate, don't underestimate the effort required in implementation. This system is really a fantastic system. It is quite complex, and we went through some serious teething problems, but with IOCO's help, we managed to get through it. And we really need a professional, dedicated, and committed project team. We had that, and I must say it helped us tremendously. And then as a company, we've made a significant stride in improving our business and applying our digitalization strategy with a world-class ERP. I just want to hop on this point because one of our key strategic drivers that we have in this company, and it's been like that for the last 3 years, is digitalization and enhancing digitalization. And I think Mark just highlighted in terms of how digitalization impacts in terms of tough times. We are now spending in excess of 5 to 6 million every year just on digitalization and seeing what we can do. That's over and above just normal license fees. That's enhancing all these processes. So we see SYSPRO as a fantastic foundation in terms of which we can now build our other elements in terms of inventory optimization, our BI tools on top of that, and make us more efficient and effective as a company. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Michael.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, everybody. So, despite all of the media and lawsuits around the failures of ERP, there have actually been some rather spectacular successes as well. And the question was raised to a group of professionals on the ERP community in LinkedIn, kind of a flash survey. And on the screen are the results of that flash survey. And you can see it's very, very clear that 40% reckon that success is based on commitment from the customer. 44% says it's a combination of the customer and the vendor. And only 17% responded that the vendor is responsible. And obviously from a vendor point of view, that's a good vindication, because if there's no commitment from the customer, it doesn't matter. You can implement the best system in the world. It will never be a success if the customer does not adopt it. So you've heard from Lewis's presentation, there was a lot of commitment. But from our side, what did we do differently? So we went on an iterative model of rapid functionality implementation and deployment within the traditional implementation framework. So hell of a mouthful, but what does that actually mean? So what we did was a bunch of smaller iterative deployments and configurations that show business value a lot faster than what you would traditionally get with a waterfall approach, right? So the end users were continuously and more directly involved in evaluating the actual functionality as it is configured. So we'd take a small section, we'd do the configuration, we'd collaborate with the end users, we'd change it, we'd fix it, we'd move on to the next one. And this helped us to ensure that a more relevant solution was delivered, and it was based on the actual business need, not our perception of the business need and not anybody's perception of how the system will address the business need. Again, so this is your kind of standard implementation process. And how did we actually fit this into our rapid deployment model? So you heard from Lewis right in the beginning. During the discovery, we did a business process mapping or business process modeling exercise to identify at a high level what the business processes were that we had to address. And I think once we'd done that, then we started in from the analysis, design, and walkthrough. And analysis became the starting point for every single iteration. We would take the business process that we'd mapped out in the discovery phase. We would compile and confirm any business requirements for that functional area, and we'd analyze the detail of the processes. And by analyzing the detail of the processes, we actually went down to a transaction list. We gather a transaction list from end users and from stakeholders, what they expected to do. We'd go into the design phase, sit with the end users and stakeholders, refine the processes, right? Refine the transaction list, and then configure the system. Once we'd gone off and built the system, we then come back to the end users and have a walkthrough of what we had actually done, right? And this approach, obviously, as I said, involved the stakeholders, and we were able to receive some very valuable input, as well as being able to provide and demonstrate feedback on how we attempted to configure the system to meet the business need. I think a big thing there is it helped to instill some ownership in the end users. And this goes back to Lewis's point around change control. Yes, there was some resistance. I think there's always resistance to change. The big thing was the end users felt part of the solution. They felt a sense of ownership in what we were putting down. So as I said, we regularly demonstrated prototypes by way of the walkthrough sessions. It showcased program features and layouts, as well as showing the transactional processes for the different business operational processes. And that's important. We could demonstrate to the end users, this is the transaction, this is how it runs through SYSPRO, and this is the end result. And we could refine it if it did not meet the end result. And I think the big advantage for us is we didn't come to the end of the implementation and realize that we'd misinterpreted or misunderstood what the business requirements were. We could regularly have a review session, a readjustment session, and have an alignment session so that we met the requirements of the business. Yeah. So what will we do differently? I think our major challenges on the whole project was actually more administrative and not necessarily methodology. The methodology was new to us. The consultants had to adjust a little bit. I think the end users had to adjust a little bit. But I think our biggest challenge is do not underestimate your documentation or your admin overheads. Our recommendation is explore some technology or tools that you can use to record or document sessions. That will help then obviously with converting or matching the business requirements into real world scenarios. That was immensely valuable. If we understood why the transaction had to happen in a way, we could configure and test it back against the scenario, and it's a real world scenario. So you've got context for how you are configuring the system. We understand what the rules are and why the rules are there, which obviously helped us when we got around to testing. I think the final point or the final learning for us was, I think, because the process was agile within waterfall, you still have to have a solution design document, but I think one should reevaluate what the traditional perception of that solution design document is actually. We would suggest rather adopt an ongoing quick write-up mechanism, and again, to that first point of find technologies that make it easier for you. Have a quick write-up using both the transaction and the scenario with explanatory notes, so that when you go and configure, you've got a reference. Once you've done the prototype and it's signed off and it's agreed, revert to an as-built document after the workthroughs and after the prototype is delivered, because then you can ensure that you've met the requirements, your configuration matches the requirements, and you've got the business rules in place. And finally, you can then go back and match your configuration back to the transaction lists, which you match back to scenarios, so that you know that you've actually met the client's requirements, you've met the business need. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.